Hello everyone, how's it going? It is Tyrnor as always, and yes, I haven't done a video in almost a month. That is entirely my fault and I apologize for that. I've been caught up in a large number of projects outside of YouTube and I apparently have rather poor time management skills. So hopefully after this particular video we're going to go back to one video per week starting this following week. But you didn't come here to listen to my apologies, you came here to hear my thoughts about BlizzCon. Now, usually when a BlizzCon comes out, other than the general excitement that always happens, I have to worry, oh lord, what are they going to inadvertently retcon today? But there aren't actually too many retcons this time, partly because not too many people ask questions about the lore this time. So, I really only can talk about the expansions, the expansion to World of Warcraft, since this is a video just about the lore that was revealed at BlizzCon. So the battle for Azeroth. Obviously I'm excited, as is everyone else pretty much whenever a new expansion comes out. Maybe not quite as excited as I was for previous expansions, but I will go into detail as to why that is. First off, regarding the premise, I suppose, of the expansion, I have to say it feels a little odd. Maybe the sense of scale is a little weird. Namely, we are going from facing such an existential threat, the Burning Legion, something that can definitely destroy Azeroth in what was said to be the largest invasion of the Burning Legion ever. So we're going from that to back to fighting amongst ourselves, although it is admittedly, this fight among ourselves is admittedly in larger scale than previous fights. But it still feels a little odd, and this is also tying in a little bit to my complaint. One of my complaints about Legion is that this alleged biggest invasion ever feels really confined to just the Broken Isles and one or two zones outside of them. But that's going off topic a little bit. So this particular succession of the story, like I said, feels a little weird to me, and I'm also not quite sure why we have to start fighting now. Is it just because we don't have an existential threat facing us today? We pretty much started fighting all out since Cataclysm, and Cataclysm was obviously a big existential threat, so I'm not sure that is an excuse. So I really hope the events of the future patches in Legion and of the pre-expansion events, as well as the events detailed in Christy Golden's new novel, will explain why we have to start fighting now. But I have to say, going from just what they talked in general about at this BlizzCon, I am pretty confident that they are not going to lose track of the general story of Warcraft. What I mean by that is that in Warlords of Draenor and in Legion, well, Legion to a lesser extent, but mostly in Warlords of Draenor, I felt that by focusing on the events of this expansion, on that existential threat more or less, or on the campaign in Draenor or whatever, they have in many ways forgotten to advance the story of the universe and of some obscure characters. Now, regarding obscure characters, Rathian was not mentioned once at BlizzCon, but I did love that at one point the camera zoomed in on, on an attendee with a "Where's Rathian" sign, but that's just a little bit of fun. So I really feel confident that they will not lose track of this, of Warcraft story this time, even if it's just because, hey, the story is actually taking place across the entirety of Azeroth this time. Really mean it. I'm looking at you, Legion. Although Outland and Northrend are once again more or less left out. But moving on to the Alliance versus Horde conflict. Uh, I feel a little conflicted about this. Now, obviously, I feel a sort of quote-unquote patriotism for both factions, but I'm having a little bit of hard time getting behind the Horde for this expansion, and this is in part because of Sylvanas. But to reiterate, I don't have anything against Sylvanas' character itself. I've talked about Sylvanas in a video of I think 2 years ago, where I talked about how I felt about her becoming war chief. And back then I said, I want to see what Blizzard does with this before I formulate a definitive opinion. And now, 2 years later, I'm still not sure what Blizzard intends to do with this, since Sylvanas in Legion has been pretty much just, oh, I'm going to do my own thing and also screw you, Greymane. Where's the Horde in this? I'm still having trouble picturing her exactly as a leader of the Horde. Sylvanas has and pretty much is just Sylvanas to me, a leader of the Forsaken and Banshee Queen, a vengeful monster, so to say, not leader of the Horde. Let me use an analogy to explain what I mean. Remember those mercenaries Arthas used in Warcraft 3 to burn his own ships and then he ordered his troops to kill? Remember that there were some ice trolls in that mercenary army. So obviously Arthas is now a leader of the ice trolls. This is a little stretching it a little bit, but to push the analogy a little further, this analogy with Arthas as a leader of the mercenary ice trolls was what I meant to explain with Sylvanas being a member of the Horde. It's a little contradiction there, even though there is a connection in the lore. It just feels odd to say, oh, Sylvanas is a member of the Horde, just as it's odd to say, oh, Arthas is leading some ice trolls. But to push the analogy further, Arthas becomes the Lich King, so he is now a king. Arthas also invades Zoldrak and turns a lot, probably the majority of the ice trolls there into undead. So a vast majority of the ice trolls are now part of the Scourge, and Arthas is the king of the Scourge. So going by that, Arthas is the king of the ice trolls, or at least the vast majority of them. So yes, technically Arthas is the king of the ice trolls, technically speaking. So as is Sylvanas, technically speaking, the war chief, but I'm having trouble sort of making that connection in my mind. It feels like a disconnect. It feels like pushing two terms that sort of contradict each other together. And I'm not opposed to the idea exactly, but I want it to be explored. I don't want the approach that, oh, Sylvanas is war chief, so naturally she's always been a patriot about the Horde. She's always loved the Horde. She's always embraced the ideology of the Horde. I don't want to sort of retcon the personality of Sylvanas to fit with this new personality, so to say, of her being war chief of the Horde. I want some explanation there, and I imagine I'm going to find said explanation in Christy Golden's upcoming novel, and I certainly hope I will, so I'm really looking forward to that. Now, I've already talked about how I thought that there is rather little reason for this conflict. I will also have to say that regarding the burning of Teldrassil and the Kalimdor becoming exclusively Horde, well, except the Azramist Isles, I have to say, burning Teldrassil in exchange for obtaining Lordaeron for the Alliance. Some Alliance players have said that that is okay because Lordaeron is a symbol from Warcraft 2 even onwards. It's always been a symbol of humanity and of the Alliance as a whole by extension. But Teldrassil and the Night of Lands, on the other hand, they are also important, and humanity can continue to exist without Lordaeron. The Night Elves, I'm not sure they can continue to exist without Ashenville, without Teldrassil, without Darkshore, without Moonglade perhaps, without all these emblematic, iconic places in the lore. You see, I think you get what I mean by now. I would also like to say that I like this idea of more and more neutral factions joining the Horde and the Alliance, because really, right, by now the Horde and the Alliance have always been pushed by Blizzard as being the two superpowers of the world, but there's always been important major and minor factions in the world, especially like in vanilla WoW, where the Horde and the Alliance are rather marginal compared to, say, the Goblin cartels or maybe, I don't know, the Centaur tribes even. That's stretching it a little bit, but you get what I mean. I like the idea that these two superpowers actually becoming the two entities on the world. And moving on to the allied races, no complaints there. I love the concept of the allied races. I've always wanted to play more races, and I like that they are exploring the story of each one of them and giving them a reason for joining the Horde and or the Alliance. The only complaint I have, although it's not really a complaint, is that I feel it feels odd that we will unlock the Dark Iron Dwarves by doing the Kol'Taras storyline. Obviously that will be explained in game, but as a first impression it feels a little odd. Speaking of which, regarding Kol'Taras and Zandalar itself, I am obviously really excited about that. Kol'Taras, it's good to have finally all of the human kingdoms or former human kingdoms in game. And regarding Zandalar, trolls are my all-time favorite race. Zandalari are some of my all-time favorite trolls. Obviously no complaints there. Regarding Kol'Taras, Kol'Taras is obviously one of the main naval powers of the world. That's pretty much self-explanatory. But this is just as my knowledge as a history student comes in. You need a lot of resources to build ships, especially in medieval and pre-modern times, where Warcraft is more or less set. And yes, Kol'Taras is a land filled with mountainous regions with ores and such, but maintaining such a massive fleet over hundreds of years requires a lot of resources, and more than just a priest's blessing. Like there's an entire zone which is led by priests which pretty much worship the sea and bless every single part of every single ship, and that's fine. I hope that they will show that, hey, building ships is complicated. We need a little more than just the words that a priest says. I also have to say that there were surprisingly few retcons regarding Kol'Taras at this BlizzCon. Kol'Taras was never a kingdom per se, and Admiral Proudmoore was always described as just another noble among others. So it makes sense to split the zone between multiple houses with each with its noble family and its own territories. So no complaints there. Regarding the Zandalari, the Zandalari have been established indeed to have a big fleet in the lore, but the Zandalari fleet is quantity-wise it is there, but quality-wise it's just a bunch of rafts or destroyers, light ships at most, and certainly wooden ships, not iron and steel ships like the Horde and the Alliance have been building recently. So you'd need, say, 5 or maybe even 10 Zandalari ships to compete with even one Horde or Alliance battleship, just to give an example. So recruiting the Zandalari as the Horde to recruit the Zandalari in order to compete with the Kol'Taras fleet seems like an enormous mismatch. Obviously, I imagine the discrepancy will be explained by, oh, the Zandalari have certain magics and certain weird voodoo spells that augment their ships that will probably make up for the difference, but it still feels weird just hearing about it. Also, so is the island of Zandalar not sinking anymore? Because the whole reason for what the Zandalari did in Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria was because, hey, our island is sinking, we need to get off our island. But now, in what they said in this zone preview, only one part of the island is sinking and the rest is perfectly fine. So, And one other thing, I feel like this massive Zandalari fleet would have been really useful for them in Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria. But I suppose we will be getting some explanation, since I heard that there are in the Zandalar on the continent of Zandalar, the story of Zul and Rastakhan will be touched upon. So I hope we will get some explanations there. And as a final thought regarding the first raid, is pretty much every single Titan facility on Azeroth, does pretty much every single Titan facility on Azeroth have the key to destroying all of the life on Azeroth in it? Well, obviously not all of them, but really there's the Halls of Origination, there's Ulduar, and now this place really feels a little excessive. Other than that, I guess that's pretty much all of my thoughts regarding this current BlizzCon. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section, and I will see you all later, actually probably this following week. So yeah, goodbye.